What's going on, guys, and welcome back to part 11 of building Twitter using UIKit and Google's Firebase. So in this part, we're gonna dive a little bit more in Google's Firebase. So without further ado, let's just get started. First, you're gonna need to go to the console of your application over here, and then from the drop-down menu that says build, I want you to check the Firestore database. This is basically the database in which we're going to store our information. For creating the database, as you can see, we're going to hit create database from this point, and then we are just going to click next for now, and then we are going to say that we are going to choose this Firestore location as it is US Central for now, and we're just going to click enable from here. Alright, so as you can see here, your database now is set. Now we just need to change one thing. And to be honest, we could have changed that while we were creating the database. However, I just wanted to let you know that we can do it, or basically change the rules from inside the database itself. So as you can see here, our database right now was set to production. So production denies all the requests by default. So we need to change that. So first of all, you're going to have to go to rules over here, just right next to data. And as you can see here, basically there are some rules here in order to access the database. Here, I want you to focus on this line. It says allow read or write if false. We can only access the database if we are logged in. However, to make it simple for now, we can just change this false to true and then hit publish. And now your database can be accessed from anywhere inside your app, whether you're logged in or not logged in. This is not super safe right now. However, our app logic does not allow user to read or write from the database unless the user is logged in. So we can change that later. However, now we are set and we can use our database right now. Let's go back to Xcode over here. And there, I'm just going to create two files, or basically another file here inside the networking and another folder inside the folder hierarchy. So in the project hierarchy over here, I'm just going to create a new folder and I'm going to call this models. So basically we are going to finally use our models here, and our first model is going to be Twitter user. Basically, we just need to create a Twitter user because, as you can see here, the user object that we get back from Firebase is not actually useful for our business logic. In our case here, our user should have like followers count, followers array, following count, and somewhere to change the display name or basically the handle of the account. So we just need to be able to modify this. So basically we're going to have to create a new user record that matches our business logic. So let's do this. So right here inside the models, I'm just going to create a new file and I'm called this basically Twitter user. So basically Twitter user is just going to be a struct. So let me type that. So struct Twitter user, and that's going to conform to the codable protocol because eventually I'll encode and decode this object. So for each user should have like an ID and it should be constant, it doesn't change. And for the other attributes, I can initialize those as variables because they could be changed along the way. So each user should have a display name of type string, and I'm going to initialize that to an empty string for now, and a username also going to be a string, an empty one, and I'm gonna have to have like a followers count, which is going to be a double. I'm going to initialize that as 0. Also for the following count is going to be double as well and initialized with 0. I'm going to initialize a new variable here. I'm gonna call that created on, which is going to be of a type date, and basically it's just going to be the exact moment this object was created. Also, I'm going to have like another attribute. Let's call that bio. Should be a string, empty string for now. And also I'm going to have an attribute which is called avatar path, which is the path in which we are going to store the image for the user. And last but not least, I want to add another attribute. I'm gonna call this is user onboarded. Let me set that to false for now. And here I'm going to make a custom initializer. So init from user, which is going to be of a type user. So in order for us to be able to use this user, we have to import Firebase as well. Okay, so let me just set this ID to user, not username, UID right here. Alright, so basically we need to add another manager next to the auth manager so that we can manipulate our database. So let's do this. So over here, let's just go to networking and hit Command N, Swift file, and let me just create a new file. I'm gonna call this database manager. Alright, so this database manager should be a singleton class. So first of all, let me just import Firebase, Firestore Swift, and also Firebase Firestore combine Swift. So let's start by typing class database manager, and that should be a singleton class. So static let shared, and basically this instance is going to reference the database manager itself. For here, I'm going to initialize some constants as well. So let db, and that's going to be our database. So firestore.firestore. So basically this is the instance that we're going to use in order for us to access the database itself. And here I'm going to initialize my path for a certain collection. So users path, and that should be of a type string, and I'm going to call this users. So basically inside this path, which is basically a reference to my collection in which I'm going to store users as documents. So basically the Firestore database is just a bunch of collections in which you can store documents. So let's say, for example, in this collection, I'm going to call this collection users, and inside this, I'm going to give that like an automatic ID to resemble the user itself. And here I can actually type in my attributes, something like the display name, and give that a value of something like and save that as you can see here. So basically I have a collection of users. This is going to be the ID of the user, and here inside of each document we're going to store the information. So I'm going to delete this collection from now. I need to do everything programmatically, and here as you can see we have our users path. Okay, I'm just going to import combine as well because I'm gonna need that. So I'm going to create a new function here. So let me type func, and here I'm going to say collection users add user, and that is going to be of a type user. And here I'm going to return any publisher, and this publisher should return something like a boolean or an error if there's an error. And here we are going to reference our basically the Firestore database to create this user record. So first of all, we need to have a Twitter user. So let me type let Twitter user, and that should be made of Twitter user using our custom initializer and pass here the user itself. And as you can see here, our Twitter user is going to have a username, ID, avatar, path, bio, and all the other attributes that we have specified. All right, so here I'm just going to reference my database, okay? And here I'm just going to create a new collection, or basically if Firebase saw a collection, let's say for here, example, users, it will create this collection if it's not created already. If it's created already, then it's not gonna bother and just add the documents. So here I'm just going to add that using my variable, so users path, and here I'm going to create a new document with the path. I'm going to set that path to my ID that I got. So this is going to be document with path ID. So this ID, as you can see, is just going to be the address that you find here so that we can query this ID later using our user's ID. So right now, since I have created this document, I'm going to say set data. And here, I'm just going to say Twitter user. So this is why I've created this Twitter user as conforming to the codable protocol so that it can actually encode this to the data type that Firebase understands and store in the Firestore. So we're gonna have to return this. And before we return this, we have to basically conform to this signature of this publisher. Alright, so the next thing is, in order for us to be able to conform to this, we have to return a boolean. So we can say something like map transform, we can pass this as nil and just return true. So that means we have successfully set that data for that user. And here I'm just going to erase this to any publisher. And as you can see here, all of our errors have gone. So this is basically very short function and it's really clean code. And as you can see here, we're basically querying our database collection at the user's path. We are creating a new document. The address of this document basically, or the title of this document, is going to be the ID of the Twitter user that we have created, and then we are going to set the data from the Twitter user object that we have right here. All right, so let's just go back to the authentication view model right here, and basically we need to catch this create user. So before dismissing the register screen, we just need to invoke this function as well. So how do we do this? So here I'm just going to say here before the sync handle events, and as you can see here there is a receive output. So in this receive output I'm going to receive my user. So let's just type receive output. Okay, just a second. So receive output, and basically that's not the one. So basically, yeah, that's the one. As you can see here, we can retrieve the user from here instead of having the user right here at receive value. So let's just catch a weak self user, and here I'm just going to set my user equals to user, and here actually I can use that user object to call this function over here. As you can see here, this function takes a user as an argument. So right now I'm just going to create a new function. Let me call this function create user record, or basically create record, okay, for user, just going to be for type user. And as you can see here, I'm gonna reference this with my weak self. So create record for user. That's really clean code over here. And here I'm just going to say database manager.shared.collection users add user. Basically, this is going to return a publisher as well. So we might as well store that in our basically subscription set over here. So sync, and here we're going to handle the error. So completion, and here we can set this completion if case failure, or basically let me just type an equal here so that Xcode helps us a little bit. So if case failure, let's just get this error. Okay, and here self, which is going to be a weak self as well. So here before we get the completion, we just need to capture a weak self. So self.error is equals to error.localized description. And here we can just get the state and print something to ourselves. So something like added or adding user record to database. And here, let me just pass in the state. All right. So we just need to store this at our set. So store at our subscription set. And as you can see here, it's pretty nice. So we're going to create user after making sure that the user has entered a valid email and a password. We're going to register that user. And whenever we have this user, we're going to handle events here based on the subscription that we have in the profile, or basically register view screen. We're going to dismiss that. And actually, before we dismiss that, we're going to call the database one more time to add our custom user from this line. So this line is going to create a new user record in our database. And this function is going to invoke this, which is basically takes our user, normal user from Firebase, create our Twitter user, add this user in its collection, which is users, using its ID, and it's going to set the data for that user using the data inside this user here. So enough talking, let's just test that. So build and run, and let's just open Firebase here for reference. And now we get our simulator here. I just logged out, and here let me just create a new account. So maybe at appleoneday.com, and 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, create account. And as you can see here, yes, we are logged in. And whenever we refresh this dashboard for the database, as you can see here, we get our users collection. We have basically created a user, and as you can see here, this ID matches this one over here, and we can say created on, that was our timestamp for today. It was created on October 17th. As you can see here, my date right now is October 17th, and is user onboarded, that is set to false. So this is awesome. So we're going to use this key so that we can handle this right here from the UI. So we can actually force the user to enter his display name, the username, and all of that kind of stuff. So let's actually do this. So back in Xcode, I'm going to go here in the view models. I'm going to create a new file, and that file should be called home view model. And basically we're going to access this view here from the home view controller over there. So let me just create this file really quick. So final class home view model, and that should conform to the observable object. Import combine over here as well. And inside this, I'm going to initialize a new published attribute, or basically a new published property. I'm gonna call this published property user. And instead of using the normal user from Firebase, we're just going to use our Twitter user over here and set that as optional, because since we're not logged in yet, basically I don't need to fill this with anything right now. And here I'm going to create a new function. So func retrieve user, and here we are going to call a function from our database manager, and based on that function we're going to populate this attribute, and we're going to subscribe actually to this publisher. So whenever we retrieve that publisher, or basically whenever we retrieve that object back that we've just created from Firebase, we are going to check if that user was actually onboarded or not. So let me just do this. So right here, let me just create a new function, func collection users. I need to retrieve this time, and here I'm just going to retrieve that user using the ID. So that is going to be a string, and we're just going to return any publisher, and this time we're not going to return a boolean. We are going to return the actual basically object, and in case of error, we're just going to return an error. All right, so right now we just need to actually retrieve that user. So let me just type db, which is our database, collections. We are just going to pass the user's path over here, and here I'm just going to say document, and as you can see here, that document address should correspond to the ID of a user. As you can see here, the ID of the user is the same as the address of this document. So let me just pass this ID, and here I can say get document, which is basically returns a future. And now, as you can see here, Firebase returned this object as document snapshot. So basically we just need to decode this to our Twitter user object over here. So gladly, Firebase Firestore Swift provides such a function. So it saves us the headache of just encoding or decoding this by hand. It's just going to be really simple. So first of all, I'm going to try map, because I'm going to use a function that basically could throw an error. So let me just type try map over here, and here I got the snapshot using this shortcut of Swift. I'm pretty sure that you're familiar with that. And actually we can get the data, and we can decode this data to our basically Twitter user using this type. And as you can see here, we just need to throw this using try. I believe this should work. Okay, and last but not least, we just need to erase this to any publisher. So it's that simple. As you can see here, we got our document. This document basically is located in the user's path over here. and that document ID, or basically document address, is just going to be the same as the user's ID. I'm going to get this document, and I'm going to try here, because this function, which is introduced by Firestore Swift, Firebase Firestore Swift here, takes all the headache of encoding, or basically decoding, the return of that function, which is basically a snapshot to our Twitter user, and mark that with a try and erase to any publisher so that we can conform with this signature over here. So let me just go back to my home view model, and here I'm just going to say database manager.shared.retrieve user, and basically I'm just going to pass the ID over here, and basically we can just get this ID easily using Firebase auth, and here I'm just going to say guard let ID, and that should be auth.current.user.uid, else return, please do not just call the Firebase with empty string. So here I'm just going to pass in the ID, and as you can see here, we can sync over this, get the completion, right? So completion, we're just going to extract that to an if case statement. So if case failure, let error. I'm just going to take this over here, introduce my weak self so that I can reference the published variable. So published error, which is going to be a string, empty string for now. If we have any error, we're just going to say self optional error.error.localized description. And here basically I have my Twitter user. So user, and here let me just capture the weak self as well, so we're not gonna be prone to any memory leaks. So self.user, and that should be user, and that's it. This is how we retrieve a user using the view model pattern over here, using this manager. And as you can see here, basically we are taking the solid principles into consideration. Retrieve a user, basically we are retrieving that user, and in this one line we're just getting the user into the shape that we want, which is basically Twitter user, and basically that's it. That's it for conforming to this signature. 2 lines of code, if we may say, because we can actually do this to make it look like a little bit cleaner. And that as well should be like this. It's really simple. So we are actually doing a lot of work using those simple 2 lines, and thanks to Combine, we can actually chain all of our network calls over here, so it looks so clean and easy to read. So over here, I'm just going to say private var subscriptions. So basically this is going to be the set in which we are going to store our subscriptions. So this is going to be a set, right set of any cancelable, and initialize that to an empty string for now. And here I'm just going to store that in my subscriptions. All right. So basically each subscription needs to be canceled, and we don't need to cancel our subscription unless we cancel or basically take that view model out of the memory. So basically this is why we are storing this in the subscription set. So whenever this view model is going to be removed from the memory, this set actually is going to cancel all the subscriptions we are storing in it. So basically this is why we are using the word store over here, if I didn't explain this in previous tutorials. All right, so we need to fetch or call this function whenever the home view model is actually is about to appear. So over here we need also to bind some views. All right, so basically let me just create a new function. So func bind views, and over here I also want to introduce my view model. So private var view model, and that should be home view model. And here I'm just going to say, I'm going to leave that function for now. And basically whenever this view is about to appear, I'm just going to say view model dot retrieve user. So whenever this view is about to show on the screen, we're going to retrieve that current user. Okay, so whenever we retrieve this user, so home view model, this function should give us back the Twitter user over here. So this is the publisher that we are interested in knowing its new content. So basically, let's just bind to this object over here. So let's go back to the home view controller. And inside of here, we are going to bind that view. So view model.user. And here, let me just type sync. Basically, this is not the publisher itself. So this is the publisher. So make sure to prefix the user with the $sign. So sync. And I'm only interested in the receive value so that I can get the user. And here, I'm just going to say weak self as well. And now we can say something like a guard let user is equals to user, else we should return do nothing. And if we have a valid user with all of its details, right, so we can check if this user was actually onboarded. So if user dot is onboarded, and I'm going to check for the opposite of that. So let me just invert that. And here I'm going to call a new function that I'm going to introduce, which is basically func complete user onboarding once and for all. So right here, I'm just going to say weak self dot complete user onboarding. So to recap really quick, whenever we about to display our users, so this bind view should be called from the view.load, as you can see here. So bind views. So at this point, whenever the view is loaded, our view is now bounded or binded to the user itself. And whenever the view is about to show on the screen, we're going to retrieve that user. And if we got any user back, we're going to listen for it right here and check if this user was not onboarded. We are going to complete the user onboarding from here. All right, so how do we do this? So easy. We are going to create a new view controller, and I guess I should put that view controller here inside my general folder. So Command N and Cocoa Touch class. I'm going to call that profile data form. Okay, profile data form view controller. Okay, hit create, and let's just delete these comments. And for starters, I'm just going to set the background to color red so that we can verify that this is actually working. So let me just go back to my home view controller, and over here, let me just initialize this view controller. So let VC is equals to profile data form view controller. And here, let's just present this view controller, set the animation to true, and basically that's it. We just need to store this subscription in our set. So subscription, I believe we haven't introduced this yet. So yeah, down this, so private var subscriptions, which is going to be a set of any cancellables, and we need to import combine as well. So combine, and here it's just going to be any cancelable. Let's initialize that to an empty set for now. And here we're just going to add this ampersand sign and say subscriptions. All right, so I believe that should do all the work that we need. So let's just do this again really quick. So whenever we initialize this view, we're going to bind our views. So what does that bind function do exactly? So basically inside that bind function, we are going to listen. If we got any user back, we're going to check if that user was not onboarded. If it was actually not onboarded, we are going to complete that onboarding by presenting this profile data form view, in which the user is going to be forced actually to enter the display name, username, and all of that kind of stuff. So let's just hit build and run so that we can see that actually is working in real life. So I'm going to open my simulator over here, and as you can see here, since this user is not onboarded, we are presented here with the function, or basically the view controller, in which the user is going to provide all the information. Okay, so let's just do this. So profile data form view controller. First of all, I'm just going to bind that. So it's not going to be dismissible. So as you can see here, the user could easily skip this part and does not provide us with the information. However, we just need to prevent the user from doing so. All right, so first of all, I believe I'm going to create a new view model over here. So Command N, a Swift file, and let me create this as basically profile data form view model, and basically let's just import combine. Here I'm going to say final class, and let's just copy the name of the class over here. So this is going to conform to the observable object. All right, so right now let's just track the data that the user is going to add through this form. So basically let's just initialize a new published variable, and that should be called display name, and that is going to be basically an optional string for now, and here a username as well. So a username, an optional string. Here we should add publisher for the bio, and that should be an optional string as well. And last but not least, the avatar path, so that we can load this photo. So avatar path. So avatar path should be a string as well. Alright, so regarding the view controller, which is basically the profile data for view controller, we're going to set the layout for this controller in the next tutorial, because this tutorial is getting too much longer than expected. So that's it for this tutorial. If you liked what you just saw, please hit that like button, consider subscribing to my channel, that would mean a lot to me. And last but not least, if you have any question, just leave them in the comment section down below, and I'll try my best to answer all of this. So once again, that was Amr, happy coding and stay safe.